very sharp, serrated edge to it, and it's shaped almost like a can opener, so it can scissor right through the shell of a turtle. And of course, this one is the biggest of this one. This is the tooth of a great white shark. Now, the great white shark tooth is a lot bigger than the first two, and you can probably see just along the edge of it, it's very sharp. It's got serrated edges, almost like a kitchen knife, and that's mainly done. And there can be about 300 teeth, well, 300 of these teeth in the mouth of a great white shark, and they're used to feed on a wide range of prey, from fish as big as tuna to turtles, mammals like dugongs, dolphins, whales, seals and sea lions. In fact, if I was to get bitten by a great white shark, it would take a lot more than a sticking plaster to patch me up. Now, I'm going to move on to insects next, because it's only over the last few years that I've started to show more of a passion for insects. In fact, I'm going to start with this one. This is a Florida centipede. It can only probably grow to be a lot longer than my middle finger. But even so, this animal is a ferocious predator. In fact, it's right at the base of the head, around here, are a pair of legs that have evolved into claws, and they're attached to a venom gland. And I've not been bitten by one of these before, but a friend of mine has, although it was a bigger cousin to it, and it's the pain as this animal bites you is said to be like a burning hot needle being plunged into your flesh. And of course, now I'm going to show you the larger cousin of the centipede I just showed you, as well as the animal that put the creep in Creepy Crawly. It is this, Squalopendra giganteum, also known as the giant squalopendra. And this is the largest venomous centipede found on the planet. It can grow to be well over 30 centimetres long, so about as long as my forearm. And just like with its smaller cousin, right there at the base of the head are a pair of legs that have evolved into modified claws, and they're attached to a venom gland. And as I said, I've not been bitten by this, but a friend of mine has, and he said that it was like having a burning hot needle stabbed into his hand. The pain went all the way up his arm until his arm went completely numb, and he was laid up in hospital for over a week with not even the maximum dose of morphine being able to stop the pain. Of course, this animal's venom probably wouldn't kill me, only probably, but all it would do is make sure that for the next few days I would be laid up in hospital with nothing in my world apart from pain. And this animal doesn't just feed on other invertebrates like millipedes, crickets, cockroaches, and beetles, but of course these centipedes will also feed on rodents, lizards, frogs, and even venomous snakes. But in a few caves in Venezuela, these animals have been seen doing something incredible, catching bats, actually hanging upside down in the roof of the cave to grab them as they fly out. Now, I'm going to show you all the beetles that I've collected. The first ones are frog-legged beetles, so called because they have frog's legs. Because believe it or not, Charles Darwin, who was the greatest naturalist and biologist who ever lived, because he had a fascination with beetles as a young man. In fact, on his when he was at Cambridge University in his youth, and also when he was on the voyage of the Beagle in the 1830s, he collected beetle specimens from around the world and put them into his own special beetle box, which is still used today. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for beetles. I'm not entirely sure. But this is a Central African jeweled beetle. It is one of the most beautiful beetles I've ever seen in my life. And of course, as I said, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for beetles. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what it is about them that I've liked so much, because when I was a kid, I was never really that into insects, because they kind of gave me the creeps a little. But beetles I've always found very fascinating. Now, the next ones are Argentinian dung beetles. Dung beetles might not be everyone's idea of an interesting animal, mainly because, hence the name, they collect dung. But I think that they are very, very fascinating in their own right. In fact, you can actually tell these two, male from female, because the male has a very distinctive horn on his head, so you can easily tell them apart. But also, the male is slightly bigger. As I said, you can tell them apart, male from female, by looking at the horn around their head, because only the male has that. I'm not entirely sure what it's for. Of course, now, I'm also going to show you all butterflies. Now, butterflies are another of those few insects I always had a bit of a passion for. Of course, the largest one in this group is the red admiral. I mean, we see the red admiral almost every day. They're one of the most common butterflies in the British Isles. Then we've also got the ringlet butterfly, the meadow brown, the large copper, the marbled white, and probably my favourite of this group is the chalk-hill blue butterfly. The chalk-hill blue butterfly was declared extinct in the wild of Britain in the 1950s, but they have been reintroduced from mainland Europe, and they've slowly been making a recovery, and they are one of the most beautiful butterflies I've ever seen. In fact, the one thing that always fascinated me about butterflies was that they start their lives off as caterpillars, because when I was a boy, I loved watching caterpillars in my garden. Then they create a chrysalis where they cocoon themselves and pupate, where they eventually spurt out from the chrysalis to become butterflies. Now, the next ones I'm going to show you are these scorpions. Now, I know for a lot of people, scorpions are some of the most frightening creatures, but scorpions are, to me, probably the most fascinating invertebrates, because one thing that I've always found most fascinating about them is that their bodies glow under UV lights. As you can probably see here, they glow under UV lights, and that's because of a protein in their exoskeleton which fluoresces under ultraviolet light. Of course, this is a yellow sand scorpion, and of course, scorpions are, as this size, they probably only feed on things like millipedes, crickets, cockroaches, beetles, and of course it has a thick tail and very small pincers, so it probably uses venom to kill its prey. Now, this one's venom probably wouldn't be fatal to me. I mean, it would probably put me in hospital for a bit, but I probably wouldn't die from it. But because the rule of thumb with scorpions on telling them apart, so if they're dangerous or not, is look at the size of the tail and the pincers. On this one, the tail is big and fat, pincers are small and thin, but on the other one, this one, which is the Asian giant forest scorpion, as you can see, tail is small and thin, pincers are big and fat. So this scorpion doesn't use venom to kill its prey. It will use its enormous claws. And of course, scorpions of this size will quite happily feed on not just crickets, cockroaches, beetles and millipedes, but also and moths, but also other scorpions and even incredibly mammals like rats and mice. And of course, if it's like this scorpion, it uses its pincers, it will more than likely crush and mash up its prey and tear it apart. But also, if you look very carefully at the legs, you'll see very, very fine hairs on each of the legs, and those are very sensitive to vibrations. Of course, scorpions have 8 legs, not 6, so they're not insects. They're in the arachnid group, which is the same group as spiders, harvestmen, ticks and mites. And of course, as I said, scorpions glow under UV light, and to me this has always been the thing I've always found most fascinating about them. But also, scorpions are also very good mothers. In fact, they will quite often, female will quite often carry her young around on her back until they're ready to disperse. But now, as I mentioned earlier, the rule of thumb with scorpions to know if they're dangerous or not is the size of the pincers and the tail. Yellow sand scorpion, tail big and fat, pincers small and thin, uses venom to kill its prey. Asian giant forest scorpion, tail small and thin, pincers big and fat, doesn't use venom, and you can quite easily have this one in your hand. I've held a scorpion like this in my hand before, and it just kept pinching me about every 5 seconds, and it really hurt. So, scorpion like this is no danger to us as humans, in fact, but if you were an invertebrate, like a cricket, a cockroach, a beetle, a moth, or even a millipede, this would be your worst nightmare. And now, the next and final one I'm going to show you is a new addition to my collection. It's this. Now, this is the largest ant species in the world. It lives in South and Central America. Around some parts of South America, they're called 24-hour ants because if you get stung by one, you can't think of anything else for at least 24 hours. But around Latin America, they're known by a very different name, bullet ants. And they're called bullet ants because being stung by one is comparable to being shot. In fact, they have the most painful sting of any insect. In fact, they rival the tarantula hawk wasp for the title of the most painful sting of any insect. Believe it or not, there was a guy called Schmidt who tested out the stings of the insects around the world to see which one was the most painful, and this one came out on top. He described it as an immense physical pain that was a little bit like stepping your heel into a rusty nail. And there's actually a tribe in the Amazon in South America that use the bullet ants as an initiation ritual where you have to take part in a dance where you have to spend 10 minutes with mittens with the bullet ants in them, constantly stinging your hands to see if you can last 10 minutes as a test of endurance. The reason for the bullet ant's incredible sting is